as an artist, I think it's healthy. I think it actually makes you a better artist to make both physical and to go back and forth between digital and physical and make physical work and see how that informs digital, and as well digital work and making it physical. I think it gives you a deeper understanding of the what I'd call the one of the main conversations in contemporary art, which is
Mm,
traveling through the mediums, which I think you see in Andy
mhm.
Warhol's late work with the Goethe, doing the graphite pencil, taking a photograph, tracing, taking a photograph of that, blowing it up, screen printing it with rainbow ink, right? And so you're using
Yeah.
all these different mediums together, using magnification. Uh, so I think it's very powerful to go back and forth. Like, how would you, for example, if you have a pixel artwork that's 256 by 256 pixels, like how are you going to turn that into a work, and what are you going to use? Screen printing? I mean, there's a whole bunch of, you could theoretically you could use a block. I just
Mm,
saw that at the Digital Art Museum
yeah.
here on the weekend. So yeah, so all to say, I think it's important, but I'm not sold that it's worth it in a sense. Like I'm very
Mm,
choosy about how I
yeah.
spend that money in the sense that I'd rather spend it at Bethanian and have world class, screen printing and printer supplies and spend that on the supplies that they'll
Yeah.
sell to me there than to spend it on an empty space. And then I'd rather almost just try and put a blanket down in the apartment and, save money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And to your point about the materials, right? The how you produce physical work, even if you are a digital artist, it's very common, right, these days to see artists creating print shops, right, or
Hmm.
creating, in the case of generative art, plotter work. And I've been spending some time researching because I wanted to buy a couple of prints. And it's a big deal, like the material they use, what kind of paper they're using, the size, and it affects the work, how the work
Hmm.
looks like. And then also the
Absolutely.
pricing changes drastically depending on the materials they are using. And you're right that artists need to go through that process, right? And experiment and see, okay, maybe this paper is looks good when I buy it, but how will the final piece look on this particular paper, right? Um, so yeah, no, that's a great point, Adrian. And what about your curation? And this is a question I had for you because I've seen many artists that have a lot of success as curators, and I think you are in a way a curator, right? With your show, with the Artist Journal, that's basically you're curating different kind of works, different kind of artists. And how do you find inspiration, like, because there are tons of artwork, right? And there are tons of digital artworks. There are different mediums. There are different platforms, marketplaces. But you have a very kind of, it's very diverse what you show. But there needs to be something that, let's say, if an artist would like to be on your show, or how do you select the works that you are actually going to talk about? Is it because you feel like there is a lot of history and substance behind them, or you do a research on the artist? And how do you discover these pieces? How does that look like?
It's a very interesting question. And I've never, it's weird because I've never, and in a weird way, I still don't have the ambition to be a curator, but I do feel like it's something I just have an innate, for whatever reason. I think
Hmm.
talent for that, or whatever you want to call it, ability, or I have within the context of what I like. So people don't have to like what I curate, but within my own world, uh, for me, it's just an immediate, innate thing, and I think it's probably based on. I think comic books had a lot to do with it. Stan Lee, the great editor
Hmm.
at Marvel Comics, the cover was the most important part. Like that's like 90% of the sales was
Hmm.
based on the cover. And I stared at those comics for years. Like that's what I would do on a Saturday afternoon. Same with trading cards. So in a weird way,
Hmm.
even stamps, in a weird way, I was trained, especially with trading cards and comics. In a weird way, I was trained by like these creative directors from like O-Pee-Chee and Tops, if you know what I mean, and like comic
Mm, mm,
companies. And so
yeah.
having spent like years, most of my youth on the weekends, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not really, uh, obsessing
Mm,
over these, owning, as a kind of collector of these things and just staring at them, that I've done so much of my life with that, and as well as studying the history of art and the ambitions of being an artist, which means you have to understand the tradition. Uh, so you put it all together, and for me, it's just a very easy thing to do. Like in terms of knowing what I
mm.
like, right? And for me,
Yeah,
so I can
yeah.
just look at a work and within a millisecond, generally, not always. Sometimes you have to look two or three times,
Yeah.
and it can take a few minutes sometimes, and even a few weeks or months. Like Hasdrubal
Mm,
waffle, I didn't understand, and then now I understand it, so I get it right away, and I love it. One of my favorites. But for a while, I didn't get it. Like I didn't get so
yeah.
you know. But generally speaking, it's a very easy process for me where I just kind of have an innate. It's almost reptilian brain. I just kind of know, quote unquote, what works for me, and in a sense, what I can live with, and I try and
Mm,
be as generous as possible. And uh, so I try, but I also need to make sure that I can live with showing that, and it's not, in a sense, in my own kind of private aesthetic, universe, that I'm not sort of undermining myself by just showing
mm,
anything. I do try and keep a kind of consistent, uh, for lack of a better term,
yeah.
curatorial style.